morning, everyone. Good to see everyone here today. For those of you that don't know, I was out sick last week. Did not make it to the church picnic, so I've been sick for probably about the last 7 to 10 days. So thank you for all your well wishes as well as checking up on me. I do appreciate all of that. I'm not always on the other end of that phone when you're leaving me a voicemail or such, but I do get to them. A lot of times, as Ron knows, my voice gets very hard it gets hard for me to speak. So to talk on the phone gets really a task. But I do thank everyone for checking in on me. It's good to be back. I'm hoping that things get better from here on out, and it's the last time I ever get sick. But I do find it interesting that the last time I had pneumonia, was during our Halloween parade. And during our Halloween parade, I wasn't able to participate in that because I was so sick, and I had the exact same thing that I had this past week. And tomorrow I'm in the Memorial Day parade. So, so I'm wondering if I'm allergic to parades. And I did miss the big outreach over in Riverfront Park last week, and that upsets me because I do like to go out and meet different people and come together and have a picnic and eat food and just have that fellowship. And it was a real bummer not to be able to go. And sometimes I wonder, sometimes you wonder as you're laying there in bed thinking about stuff, is this part of something else? I got sick during the Halloween parade. I got sick during this outreach event coming up. And part of me wonders, is all this just part of some bigger battle that I'm going through? That when there's different opportunities to reach out to different people and to make differences, do I somehow get sick through either my own accord, or is there something else going on? I don't know. And I know that's kind of like a weird and uncomfortable question to ask, but are there other elements out there that are causing influences in these things in my life? Because during these times when I get sick and during these times when I can't be there, it makes me question myself. It makes me question, well, is the church still going to want me back? Or it makes me question, well, gosh, maybe I should just stop doing these things. And the answer to that is no. I see a lot of heads shaking out there. The answer is no. And I tell you, it's a war. It's a war. We're talking about Memorial Day today because tomorrow's Memorial Day, where we remember all the people that have died for our country and the freedoms that we have gained from the lives that they've sacrificed. And I just can't even imagine what that's like. And I also think that we're still facing our own wars here in Bainbridge, in our homes, in our schools, in our lives, in our government. And I just couldn't help but compare the two, or parallel the two, between the wars that were fought for our freedoms and the wars that we're in every day to gain freedom from our own sin. There's casualties in both. There's fear in both. And I remember when I was a kid, both of my grandfathers were in the war. And I would hear some war stories, It was always interesting to hear the war stories. And just the amazing things that these people had gone through. And you don't hear the stories as much anymore. I know generations have passed. People that have been like in World War II have passed. And it seems the wars after that, we've heard fewer and fewer war stories. And I think it's for a couple of reasons. I think it's because some of the people have become feeling unappreciated, maybe. You know, Vietnam War was a little tricky with the way people were received when they came back home and the other wars. And I wonder if the war stories are not being told because it hurts to tell them. Not that it didn't hurt to tell them back in World War I, World War II, and all that, but I think as people are interacting with one another, that they're feeling less and less happy, less and less eager to tell these stories because it hurts so bad. And when I think of the wars that we're facing, we talked about unsung heroes on Mother's Day a few weeks back, and how we're all soldiers in Christ, and how as believers in Christ, we are at war with the world. And as we face ourselves, as we look at ourselves as these things are going on around us, things of the flesh, sometimes arguments with one another, sometimes not feeling like the world is for us, but the world is against us, we are less likely to tell our stories. Because as a Christian soldier, we might feel that we need to just keep our stories to ourselves. Because one, maybe our battle didn't turn out the way we wanted. Maybe our battle didn't end in the victory that we wanted. Maybe it makes us look bad. And that's an unfortunate truth because our life is full of challenges and conflicts. And sometimes we don't think of that as war, but that is a war. And we might not be carrying weapons. We might not be like riding in tanks or wearing military uniforms. But just the same, there are casualties. There are battles that we don't make it through or that we need help to get through. And 2 Corinthians 10:3 tells us, "For though we walk in the flesh, we do not go to war according to the flesh. For the weapons of warfare are not carnal, but mighty in God for pulling down strongholds, casting down arguments and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, bringing every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ, and being ready to punish all disobedience when your obedience is fulfilled." Maybe one of the other reasons people aren't telling their war stories as much is because in today's world, warfare seems to go against the things that Jesus taught. Today, Christians don't feel like warfare is Christian-like. And I can understand where they're coming from. But the main theme of the Bible, the main theme of what God is showing us from Genesis to Revelations is warfare. And I think if we don't see it as warfare, we walk through life with our guard down. People think that a Christian cannot be in a battle and come through the other side. But it makes me think of the shepherd in the field. Imagine the shepherd in the field with his flock, and a wolf attacks, or a pack of wolves attack the flock. What is the shepherd to do? Does the shepherd sit by and wait for his sheep to be destroyed? No. That shepherd is going to fight that wolf with everything that he has. Now, I'm not condoning violence. I'm not condoning anything in that nature, but I think we have to look at war as war. And stop worrying so much about how does it make me look? How does it reflect me as someone in this war? How do I get to the other side? Well, today we're going to learn a battle plan. We're going to learn a battle plan designed for the Christian soldier. And to do this, we're going to look at one of the well-known battles of the Old Testament. We're going to go to the Battle of Jericho. And we're going to find that in Joshua 6, if you're looking to follow along. Now, Jericho is tied into Moses leading the people to the Promised Land. We all know the story. We talked about baby Moses on Mother's Day, who grew up to be a great leader of Egypt, who led out the Israelites from Egypt to go to the Promised Land. And Moses was their leader at the time. The Battle of Jericho, which we'll explain in a second, was led by Joshua. That was the man who came to be their leader after Moses passed away. Now, just to give an idea of what the Promised Land looked like, just to visualize it a little bit, the Promised Land, before it became what it is today, was an area of Canaan, and it was divided up into little city-states, like little groups of city-states. And they were fortified with walls. They had armies. Each one of these little cities had a king. So it wasn't so much so like, you go from town to town like we would here. These were fortified areas. And these were what the Israelites were promised by God. And even Jericho, when I tried to picture Jericho, Jericho was only about 10 acres large, which is a lot smaller than I imagined. And Jericho had this very large wall going the whole way around it. And then into that wall was another wall. There were two walls. And then inside that wall was the city where people lived. So in Joshua here, in Joshua 6, we find Joshua, actually back up a second, we go to 5:13. It says, "And it came to pass when Joshua was by Jericho, that he lifted his eyes and looked, and behold, a man stood opposing him with a sword was drawn in his hand." So Joshua is here. He knows he needs to lead the Israelites into the Promised Land. He's looking at Jericho. This was the first town that they needed to go through. So he's standing there by Jericho, and then he lifted his eyes, and he sees a man holding a sword. And Joshua went to him and said to him, "Are you for us or for our adversaries?" He says, "Are you with me or not? Are you with us or not?" And then he said, No, but as a commander of the army of the Lord, I have now come. And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and worshipped and said to him, What does my Lord say to his servant? And then the commander of the Lord's army said to Joshua, Take your sandals off your foot, and because the place where you stand is holy. And Joshua did so. So, Joshua is not a stranger to Jericho. If you remember the story, or if you know the story, they were in this place 40 years earlier with Moses, with Aaron. And they sent spies into the cities. Do you remember the story? Are you familiar with it? They were spies sent into the cities. And the spies came back and it told the people, it told the Israelites that this place is beautiful, that it flowed with milk and honey. It was everything that God had promised them. So everywhere they had traveled, they were slaves in Egypt. They were rescued by Moses, led into the wilderness. They came to the promised land. They sent spies in to check it out ahead of time. The spies came back and said, everything is beautiful. Everything is just as God has promised us. That's got to be pretty exciting. But they also said that the cities were fortified with walls. They said there's a lot of army. There's a lot of bad guys. One guy said, well, there's even giants that'll eat our bones. And based on that, the Israelites refused to enter into the promised land. Not even did they just say, we're not going to go into the promised land. They said, can we go back to Egypt? Can we go back to where we were slaves? Because this just isn't working for us. Yeah, it's great. God promised us this, and it's beautiful, flowing milk and honey and all that stuff. But did you hear there's a wall? Did you hear there's soldiers, bad guys, maybe even giants? Why would they want to go back? Why would they want to go back to a life of slavery instead of entering into the promised land? It sounds really silly. But aren't there times where we run back to our sins, our old lives? Aren't there time after time in our lives that we think, I just want to go back to the way things were. This is too difficult. This is too much work. This is too much trouble. If it were that easy, everybody'd be doing it. But the thing is, everybody should be doing it. But I think of like stories in my own life of people I know and people that are dealing with addictions where it's easy for me to just say, just stop what you're doing. But it's not that easy, and people want what's easy. People want what they know. People are afraid to move forward, even if it's everything that God has promised them. Even if it's going to give you everything that you've wanted, if it takes change, if it takes effort, if it takes risk, we're more likely to go back to what we know, no matter how much it hurts us. Time and time again, it is seen. Time and time again, even in our daily life. That is why this world is a battle. Sin is the enemy. But so many times we'll go back to the enemy than to live free, because it's easier. Just recently, just the other day, it was actually the day I was talking to Ron on the phone. Well, the wife walks into my room. Well, not my room. It's like a little office area. And I have a recliner in there, very nice, comfy recliner. And she walks in, and then I've got 3 blankets on me. And I got a space heater on in front of me. And she walks in, and she looks at me. She's like, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm cold." She goes, "But you got the air conditioner on." I said, "Yeah, but I was cold. I wasn't cold when the air conditioner was on, and then I got cold. And I had a blanket here, so I put my blankets on that were hanging on my chair, and I was still cold. So I turned the space heater on that's right here down at the bottom of my chair. And I wasn't cold anymore." She goes, "Yeah, but the air conditioner's on. Why didn't you just turn the air conditioner off?" I said, "Well, the air conditioner's way over there. And I'm cold, and I wanted to be warm, so I started with what was close to me, was the blankets. And then that didn't work, and the air conditioner's still way over there. So I turned the space heater on." And she just rolls her eyes at me and leaves. The funny thing is, this whole message was built off of that moment. Because I'm sitting there thinking, "Well, this is kind of dumb, but how many times do we do that? We take what's easier rather than make our lives better by just having to take a few steps. We don't want to take those steps, even though those steps make sense. So, again, we have Joshua standing outside of Jericho, remembering these things from before. And so much so, like, I'm thinking, yeah, but, the people back then, they wanted to go home. And I thought, well, I'm sure, and I looked, I'm like, I'm sure there was, Moses, and they had some wise words for him. And I look here and I see it says, "So they said to one another, 'Let us select a leader and return to Egypt.' It says, 'Then Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before the assembly of the congregation and the children of Israel.'" I was looking for words of wisdom, and I think at that point, not even Moses knew how to respond. But there was a man there, one of the spies, who responded. And he said, "The land we passed through to spy out is an exceedingly good land. And if the Lord delights in us, that he will bring us into this land and give it to us. It is a beautiful land. The Lord is giving it to us." He goes on to say, "A land which flows in milk and honey. And only do not rebel against the Lord, nor fear the people of Israel, for they are the bread, and their protection has departed from them. and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them. So this man, one of the spies, addresses the crowd that wants to go back to Egypt, and he says, hey, this is ours. This doesn't belong to them. The Lord is not with them. The Lord is with us. Let's go. Now, unfortunately, the response of the crowd, it says, for all the congregation said to stone them. So this man full of wisdom, this man that has the right idea, that's saying we can't let them have our land because the land was given to us by God. We have to take it. And they threatened to stone him. That man, Joshua. So that man is now the leader of the Israelites and is standing outside the same place as they were standing before. But standing with him right now is the Lord. Joshua knows. And the Lord goes on to tell Joshua, it says, now Jericho was securely shut up because of the children of Israel. None went out and none came in. And the Lord said to Joshua, see, I have given Jericho into your hands, its king, and the mighty men of valor. He's saying the victory is yours. Go get it. He is also saying that the people of Jericho have heard about them. And they know that the Lord is with them. And they fear them because the Lord is with them. And the people, the Israelites, just need the courage to move forward because God is with them. Do they have that courage? Do they understand that God is with them and they must move forward? God continues to give instructions on how this Jericho will become theirs. He says, you shall march around the city, you, all you men of war, and you shall go around the city once, and you shall do this for 6 days. And the 7 priests shall bear 7 trumpets of ram horns before the ark. So they have the Ark of the Covenant. They have the 7 priests, and the priests are going to blow ram horns, and they're going to walk around the city for 6 days. And then God goes on to say, but on the 7th day, you shall march around the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow the trumpets, and it shall come to pass that when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when you hear the sound of that trumpet, that all the people shall shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city will fall down flat, and the people shall go up, every man straight before him. So God has given the battle plan. This is how we're going to do this. This is the only way we're going to do this. The plan was soldiers were going to march, priests were going to blow their horns, there was going to be the Ark of the Covenant, and then there was going to be a rear guard. They're going to go around the city once for 6 days. Then on the 7th day, they're going to go around 7 times, and then there's going to be a long horn blast, Everybody's going to shout. Walls are going to fall down. Sounds sensible, right? I did find it interesting, their choice of horn. So apparently the priests, they had two different kinds of horn they would play. There was a silver horn, which was used to make announcements and such. And then the ram horn. The ram horn was a horn of jubilation. Celebration horns. Party horns. They're carrying the horns to celebrate when they're going to war. Why? Because the victory's already theirs. So then Joshua the son of Nun called the priests and said to them, "Take up the ark of the covenant, and let 7 priests bear 7 trumpets of ram horns before the ark of the Lord." And he said to the people, "Proceed and march around the city, and let him who is armed advance before the ark of the Lord." He's given them God's instructions. So it was, and when Joshua had spoken to the people, that the 7 priests bearing the 7 trumpets of ram horns before the Lord advanced and blew the trumpets. And then the ark of the covenant of the Lord followed them. And then the armed men went before the priests who blew the trumpets. And then the rear guard came after the ark, while the priests continued blowing the trumpets. So here, this next part. So that's God's plan, word for word. That's what they have to do. This next part, Joshua commanded the people, saying, "You shall not shout or make any noise with your voice, nor shall a word proceed out of your mouth until the day I say to you, shout." They're not allowed to make any noise. The only noise that is allowed to be heard is the sound of the trumpets. There's no talking, there's no yelling, nothing. It's the first quiet game. The part I found interesting about it is I didn't see that in God's instructions to Joshua. I think Joshua just wanted them to be quiet. But that's their instructions. They are not allowed to make any noise until the day comes where they have the long trumpet being blown. And he says, "Shout, and then you shall shout." So he had the ark of the Lord circle around the city, going around at once, and then they would come into camp at night. So day 1, this happened. And they go back into camp. And then Joshua rose early the next morning, and the priests took up the ark of the Lord. And then the 7 priests bearing the 7 trumpets of ram horns before the ark. And the Lord went up the ark of the Lord and went on continually blowing the trumpets. And then the armed men went before them, and the rear guard came in after the ark of the Lord, while the priests continued blowing the trumpets. And then the second day, they marched around the city once and returned to camp. And they did this for 6 days. Can you imagine that? Like, you're ready to take on this city. And all you're doing, you're going around, you're walking around it. And again, this isn't a big place. You might be walking a mile to walk around the city. And then you just go back to your encampment. I would imagine there were some people that wanted to do their own thing. And say, we're going to just ram the gate, we're going to run the guard, we're going to do this, that. But you know what? They didn't. They followed God's plan. And then, it came to pass on the seventh day that they rose early out of the dawning of the day and marched around the city 7 times in that same manner. So far, for all 7 days, they've been following God's word. It's the 7th day. Today's the day it's supposed to happen. In our own lives, we can enter into our days of victory just the same when we follow God's directions for us. God's directions for us comes in 2 steps. It's the name of today's message. 2 steps. 1, ask God what his plan is for you. Number 2, do it. That's it. 2 steps. Ask God what his plan is for you and do it. That's the plan for all these soldiers right now. They asked what God's plan was for them, and they're doing it. 2 steps. Ask God what their plan is for it and do it. Ask God what their plan is for it and do it. Ask God what his plan is for you and do it. You kind of get that cadence. Now you can almost hear the soldiers marching around Jericho. This is the cadence of obedience to God. Most people have a 1-step plan. Do what I want. Do what I feel like doing. Asking God for help later. That doesn't have the same effect. And even if we look at it in the physical form of the march, ask God what his plan is for you and do it. Now, what happens if I do everything my own way with 1 step? I didn't get anywhere, did I? And that's what happens to us. When we follow our own plan, when we have 1 step, we're not marching towards victory. We're just going around in circles. And then we wonder how we got there. And it's not just us as individuals. We see groups of people in the Bible, groups of people all throughout who try their own plan first and fail miserably. And they're just going around in circles. And it's not until we face our battles using God's plan that the outcome is going to change. So it's the 7th day. It's the 7th day as they head out. They rose early that dawn, and they marched around the city 7 times in the same manner. And on that day, they marched around the city 7 times. And the 7th time it happened, and the priests blew their trumpets, and Joshua said to the people, "Shout, for the Lord has given you this city." And now the city shall be doomed by the Lord to the destruction. And it was all who were in it. And only Rahab the harlot shall live. She was part of a spy mission early on. And she and who was with her in her house, because she hid the messengers that we had sent. And it goes on to say, "And you by all means abstain from the accursed things, lest you become accursed when you take of the accursing things, and make the camp of Israel a curse, and trouble it. What they're saying is, this is God's victory. We are getting the promised land, but it is God's victory. You are not going to gain materials from this gift. You don't, here he's saying, you don't go in there and take anything for yourself. You don't go in and you don't steal from the people, or you don't take slaves of the people, or you don't come out with any gain of yourself. God gave us this promised land. This is his victory. He has given this to us. Take nothing for yourself. This is all for God's glory. He goes far as to say, and all the silver and the gold and the vessels and the bronze and the iron that are consecrated to the Lord, they shall come into the treasury of the Lord. So the people shouted when the priest blew the trumpets, and it happened when the people heard the sound of the trumpets that the people shouted. And with a great shout, the walls came tumbling down. And then the people went straight up into the city and took the city. Israelites had finally entered into the promised land by the direction of God. They entered into this city after 40 years of waiting. 40 years. And the only reason that they were not there for all that time was their own choice not to follow God's plan. It scares me to think how much of my life was lost because I didn't follow God's plans. How many battles did I choose not to fight with God's plan? And how much more could I have experienced? How much happiness could I have experienced? And how many pains could I have avoided had I just listened to God? God's battle plan for us is to fight from victory, not for victory. Jericho was already won for the Israelites. They had the victory already. Secondly, overcome the enemy with faith. God's not telling you to go into battle violently. God's not telling you to judge others. God's not telling you to make other people angry. He wants you to overcome the enemy with faith. And lastly, he says to obey God. Obey God and give him the glory. These are the only battles we should be winning. These are the only battles we should be fighting. Those that are directed by God. And it's hard for people to wrap their heads around. It's hard for people to understand that. But the evidence is here in front of us. If you believe the Bible to be real, we just saw Jericho be given to the Israelites with a couple of trumpets. We've seen David kill a giant with a sling and a stone. And we saw Jesus conquer death with a few nails in a tree. Don't always look what you feel is your best interest. Look to the Bible. Look to our Father in heaven, the creator of all things. Ask him how to get through your battle. how am I going to get through this battle, Lord? What